Welcome to The Real Final Mile, life in big and bulky home delivery, the only podcast dedicated to the delivery professionals that bring your large consumer goods to your home.
When your brand is riding in the back of the truck, good enough is not an option. Choose Clark's White Glove Delivery, delivering peace of mind with 3 decades of experience and an exceptional trained team built for a courteous customer experience. From white glove delivery to assembly and installation, in-home moving, furniture repairs, and climate-controlled warehouse storage, Clark's White Glove Delivery adapts to the job, not the other way around. And behind the scenes, it's not just storage, it's clean and organized warehousing facilities designed for efficiency, accuracy, and dependable distribution. Because Clark's White Glove Delivery is also about presentation, crews show up looking sharp, consistent, and ready to represent your brand with professionalism from the first handshake to final placement. Clark's White Glove Delivery, warehousing and final mile done the right way. Visit clarkswgd.com to get started.
Welcome back to The Real Final Mile, the show where big and bulky meets standards and white glove actually means something. Today's guest is James Clark, owner of Clark's White Glove Delivery out of Indianapolis, Indiana. Jim has been in the game since 1997, which means he's seen every trend, every curveball, and every that delivery should have been easy situation you can imagine. And he's still standing with a business that delivers furniture and warehousing services the right way. Jim's one of those leaders who doesn't need hype because the timeline does the talking. When you run an operation for nearly 3 decades, you learn what works, what breaks, and what separates a good delivery company from a great one. So if you're into real-world lessons, hard-earned wins, and a few stories that probably start with, "You wouldn't believe what happened at this stop," you're in the right place. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. I appreciate the introduction.
Yeah, no problem.
3 decades makes me feel a little older. Yeah.
I know it stings, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. I did start really early, so, there's that.
Yeah, child labor laws weren't a thing when you started.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and Jim, I look back on the 3 decades and obviously in the same exact bucket that you're in, and it does sting a little bit when you realize, wow, you look at the driver's license and you realize how many years are stacking up there. But I like to look back at it from a different perspective and from the legacy perspective to see what we've built, what you've built. And having been on site to a lot of your locations and seeing the standards that are in place, I personally will say you should be looking back with a lot of pride on the last 3 decades because you've built something that's going to sustain for the next 3 decades and more. So I will congratulate you on that.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate that. I don't look back at it being 3 decades. Everything seems like it was yesterday. Some things do seem like it was a long time ago. Things move really quick in this industry, and time flies for everybody.
Yeah, it certainly does. So let's flash back to the beginning, Jim. What got you into Final Mile and what made you commit to it for 3 decades?
Well, I had the opportunity to be a contractor. They sell it as be your own boss, work for yourself. And I was fresh out of the Marines, looking for something, looking for a career. My plan was to go to work at an airport. I had my FCC license. I worked on airplanes and helicopters, jets, a little bit of everything in the Marines. So, I thought that was going to be my career. I never in a million years thought that I would own a furniture delivery company. Wasn't on the top of my list as things to do. So, I got that first contract and started doing deliveries and just built customers from there. Everybody you meet is a potential customer. And that first year, I met a lot of people. You go into a lot of houses, 10 houses a day, 15 houses a day. You're meeting, just regular Joe homeowner who has nothing to do with the furniture industry, or you might be delivering to a designer who's one of the top designers in the country, and you just never know. So I met a lot of people that first year, and after that first contract was up, moved on from that. I didn't have the greatest experience as a contractor. Felt that, I was taken advantage of a little bit. So I moved on, found another contract doing building materials deliveries, and did that for quite some time while I was building up our furniture delivery side of the business. So finally got to the point where I could afford to get a warehouse, 1,500 square foot, which, I can't even imagine. Our office is bigger than 1,500 square foot now. I don't know how we operated out of that ever. So, and just went from there, and just, word of mouth have grown over time, and just kept going.
So, Jim, we've known each other for about a decade, maybe a little longer. And I didn't know the part about you wanting to go and be a mechanic. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I spent 6 years in the Marines, and, my background was electronics. I, spent first year and a half in electronics school, thought, and I did, I was accepted into college into electrical engineering. That wasn't the path I wanted. I never wanted to go to school. Was not a huge fan of school other than socializing. That was my point of going to school. So I just couldn't see sitting in class for another 4 years. I was ready to get out and do something. So joined the Marines and thought that was going to be my path. But life changes.
Yeah, it does. First, before I move on, for those veterans that are watching the show, I don't want to move on beyond that without saying thank you for your service, because I know I'll get called out on it. Yeah. So through all those years, Jim, what was the biggest "we learned this the hard way" moment that made your operation better?
I was thinking about that question, since I'll go ahead and reveal the secret. I did see these questions beforehand. I was thinking about that question, and the one thing that always pops in my head is, buying used trucks. I've had several used trucks, and when you start out, I mean, that's what we started with. Well, I lie. Our very first truck was a brand new truck. It lasted for over 200,000 miles, was great. And then we started buying used equipment, two blown engines, I think $15,000 for the first one, almost $20,000 for the next one. Was a pretty hard lesson. When you buy a truck for $20,000 and you're just getting started, and that's all the money you have, and then the engine blows up and now you owe $20,000 on a truck and have to spend $15,000 to get it repaired, is pretty tough. So, I quit buying used trucks. They weren't worth the hassle. Sometimes you have to, and if you're handy and you can work on it yourself and you have the time, great. But at a certain point, that dependability of a new truck that, you can take to the dealer and get fixed and get a loaner, and it's worth the price. I mean, your brand can only take so many hits. And, if you have trucks that are breaking down, that are leaking oil, that just don't run well, they're not dependable, your business isn't going to be dependable. So that was probably the biggest aha moment for me, and that I think about all the time.
I think that's powerful because, we lived through 2000 where guys couldn't find a truck at all. There was all the different shortages that we were facing, and then home delivery was skyrocketing. The advice I had given to a contractor back then was he needed to have $10,000 cash for every truck that he was going to run, whether he owned it or not, because these expenses pop up, and if you can't run the truck, you can't make money. One of the tactics that a contractor actually took on was he actually became a diesel mechanic himself so that he could, in his words, turn the wrench himself. So, Jim, what advice, I'm going to hit you with a question you didn't see beforehand. What advice do you have to that guy or gal who's coming up now? Because I think your advice is valid about, don't buy a used truck because you don't know what problems hide underneath the hood. What advice do you have to that person coming up on how they can get their start and get behind the wheel of a truck and start making some money?
Well, I think, having some credit. I think it's something that's not taught in school early enough. Getting for kids to have a credit card and actually have credit when they get out of school and they're 18, that's pretty rare these days. So I would say build your credit. That's one of the biggest things, build your credit, and so that you can go buy that new truck. And if you haven't built the credit and you can't buy that new truck and you have to buy a used truck, make sure either A, you are a mechanic or a mechanic, that you have a dependable guy, because truck repairs are outrageous. And if you are just taking it to a dealer to get it serviced and you're just getting started, those repairs will sink you.
I agree, Jim. I love that advice because you're right. There are some schools now that are starting to teach financial responsibilities and how to be a better citizen when it comes to your finances. But for those who don't know who Dave Ramsey is, they don't know that there's things that you need to do to prepare your kids for the real world. So what do you think separates an average delivery team from a truly elite white glove delivery team?
So with this one, I think one thing that easily visually separates good delivery teams from substandard is a uniform. Like, that's the first visual indicator that they have some sort of pride in what they're doing. It's you just look at them, you can tell. Do they have a uniform, or are they in sweatpants and a ball cap? If they're in sweatpants and a ball cap, do they have any standards? Maybe. They say you can't judge a book by its cover, but whoever put them in that truck didn't have the standards to require a uniform. So I think that's the first simple one. And then once you get past that and you get to the truly elite delivery teams, that do have uniforms, that do the simple things. I think training is one of the biggest things. Are they training their teams? If you have a company that's training their teams and it's consistent training, that's a big deal, because you can get consistent service from any location, from any team. So that training, I think, is a huge part of separating those teams that are elite and those that aren't.
That wasn't planted, but I will say we're going to take a quick break just for a second for a little commercial about training, and we'll come right back to Jim.
If you sell big and bulky products, I want to talk to you for a minute. Refrigerators, sofas, sectionals, bedroom sets, fitness equipment, treadmills, all the stuff that makes customers excited to buy and furious when the delivery goes wrong. You invest heavily in merchandising, marketing, and sales training. Now ask yourself an uncomfortable question. Have I invested the same level of care into the people who actually walk into my customer's home? Because that is where your brand is truly judged. After 30 years in logistics, here is what Doolin Strategy Partners has seen behind the curtain. Most delivery teams, whether employees or third-party contractors, have little to no formal training. They are figuring it out on the fly in your customer's living room. Your reputation, your reviews, and your repeat business are on the line every single stop. That means scratched floors and damaged doorways, missed time windows and poor communication, "That's not my job" attitudes during assembly or haul away, and one bad experience turning into a one-star review that lives online forever. None of that came from your beautiful showroom. It came from the last 10 feet of the customer journey. Here is the good news. You can fix this, and you do not have to build it from scratch. Get Doolin Training is built for the final mile. It certifies delivery teams on the skills that matter most to your customer: safe handling and installation of big and bulky items, professional conduct in the customer's home, communication, expectations, and problem-solving on site, protecting product, property, and your brand on every stop. If you partner with third-party carriers, make Get Doolin certification part of the deal. If you run your own fleet, make it part of the job. You wouldn't let an untrained salesperson represent your brand on the sales floor. So why let an untrained team represent your brand at the front door? Your customers are already asking for better experiences. Soon, they will start asking a very specific question. What kind of training do your delivery teams have? Be ready to say with confidence, our teams are certified on the Get Doolin Final Mile training platform. It's not hard to find, and the value is clear. Fewer damages, better reviews, more repeat business, and a customer who feels taken care of from the showroom to the living room. If you sell big and bulky, your delivery team is not an afterthought. They are your last impression. Make sure that impression is certified, prepared, and proudly trained on Get Doolin. Doolin Strategy Partners has you covered here.
Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that commercial. Jim, your approach to a customer experience when things go sideways. What's your advice to the delivery team who's bearing down on an angry customer?
Act quickly. Take care of the problem. Identify what the problem is and take care of it. Don't worry about who caused the problem, who's at fault, why it happened. Get the problem taken care of. After the problem's taken care of, then worry about the root cause, what happened, how it happened, who caused it, what we can do better so that it doesn't happen again. But in the moment, take care of the problem. Don't hide from it. Don't lie about it. Don't make things up. Sometimes people want to overshare. Give them the basics. Let's figure out how to fix this and get it done. Action speaks louder than words when there's issues. So, do the work, get it taken care of, and move on.
I agree with that. And so, Jim, over the years, we've come in contact with folks who lack that. I don't know if it's a discipline or if it's a personality trait where they can do that, where they can recognize something's going wrong, and instead of doing the right thing, stepping back, assessing, and taking immediate action, they tend to punt that responsibility of, well, I told my manager, I told them on the dock. What advice do you have for the guy who's in that spot, the guy who's watching this video, who does panic? Because none of us were perfect at it at first. For me, my face would turn bright red and I wouldn't know what to say, and I was afraid I was going to betray somebody. And it took me years until I learned one key phrase for me that really de-escalated everything was, hey, this is my fault. What advice do you have for the guy to really take control of that?
I think there's a couple things, and you're right. These are tough situations to deal with, especially for a 20-year-old kid that's out there that's never had to deal with this and doesn't know how. And one great thing about our industry is typically there's two guys in the truck, and hopefully one of the guys has a little more experience than the other one. It's not always the case. A lot of times there are two 20-year-old kids in the truck, that don't have a lot of experience. So being calm, taking ownership of the situation, like you said. I think, it's one of my favorite books, Jocko's Extreme Ownership. If you can't take ownership for the situation and control it, you're never going to succeed in no matter what you're doing. So being able to see that situation, take ownership of it in the moment and not punt, not give it off to somebody else. Not to say that you can't call somebody else. A lot of times, I think that's one of the best tools that you have is maybe a dispatcher or an office manager or somebody that you can call to help with that situation, because sometimes you're not going to know what to do. But having the vision to see that, hey, I'm going to go step outside and make a quick phone call, get somebody on the phone that can help, and I'll be right back in. And step outside and make that phone call and get somebody that's on your side that can help out. And help take care of the customer in a situation where, maybe you just don't know what to do, because that's going to happen.
Yeah, it is. And it still happens to me after all these years. So Jim, we talked about, doing everything they can to enter into adulthood with some type of a credit standing. You talked about knowing a mechanic or being a mechanic, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper down the owner-operator path and ask, what advice would you give to a new owner-operator who's trying to build something like what you built? Mm-hmm. And where I really want to go deep with this is great leaders make this look easy. And you and I see it on docks across the country where you get a guy who's watching you walk across the dock and he wants to be you, but he doesn't know all of the scars and the tears and the sweat and the blood that has been spilled over the years. So you get a guy that walks up to you and let's say he's 23, he's done the helper thing, he's in a truck, and he says, Jim, how do I be you? What advice do you give him?
Work hard. I think I think one thing that a lot of people see is you're right. They see the tip of the iceberg, right? They don't see all the work underneath that goes into it. And I had a guy come up to me several years ago, and he said, "If I was you, Mr. Clark, I'd eat steak every day." And I'm eating, leftovers from the day before because it's, it's about how you live. Like I've never lived like I have made it, like I'm successful, like, this is it for me. I live every day like, I want more. Um, Tom Brady was getting interviewed a few years ago and they were asking him what he was doing in the off season. And he was like, well, I really sucked at this and I had to work at this. He's one of the best quarterbacks ever. And he's talking about the things that he doesn't do well. And that's what he's working on in the off season, and I think people don't see that. People don't see that you have to stay at it, that you have to work, that you have to work all the time. Um, I think one of the biggest downfalls to a contractor that's getting started is once he gets to that point where he's got two or three trucks and he thinks he's getting to be successful. He's like, yeah, I made it. I'm just going to sit at home and watch my trucks run. You can't. If you're not in a truck making money, if you're not out hustling, if you're not out getting more business, you're not going to continue to grow. You have to have work every day. And I think that's where people fall short, is they're not willing to put in the work.
So when you started this whole thing, did you have a vision of what you wanted to build, or did you just come in every day saying, I'm just going to work as hard as I can and see what happens at the end of the day?
I've been criticized a lot for not, having a vision statement, for not, and I say a lot by, Nick Bailey, guys that worked for me that, look up to me for vision. I've never, when I started, I didn't look at this and think, this is what I'm setting out to build. I just put my head down and went to work. I needed money. So, I needed to be able to get out there to support my family. So, at first it was a means to an end. I always wanted to work for myself. I always, didn't like people telling me what to do. I've always been kind of a make my own rules kind of guy. So, living by other people's rules has always been tough for me, especially when you tell me like I can't do something and I can clearly see that it can be done. Those things have always been tough. So I think that was one of my biggest goals, was just to work for myself and then to be financially independent. I mean, that was the two goals I had, to work for myself and make money.
Okay.
How it was going to happen, what it was going to look like, I really didn't have any idea. I never imagined that I'd have 8 locations across the Midwest, running 500 deliveries a day. I thought it was going to be one location in Indianapolis with 5 or 6 trucks and, we'd be happy. I didn't mention that we do have values, that we live by. And I think in every facet of life, there's people that don't, that you come across, that you deliver to, that you work with, that, just that you have to deal with for whatever situation. That it's unfortunate, because it ruins things for a lot of good people. And it really leaves you jaded sometimes. But you deal with it and you move on. You can't assume that everybody is that way just because you had to deal with 3 people that were that way today. You have to maintain your standards and, hold everybody else to that same standard. They have to know what your standards are, so that they can maintain them as well. But, putting that message out there within the company and promoting that culture, of treating people right, of doing the right thing, goes a long way.
I agree with that. So, Jim, if you had a magic wand, what's the one change you would make to improve the industry today?
I think the easiest way to improve the industry today is to simplify the technology that's out there. Everybody is spending money on technology, and for good reason. Technology has changed and come a long way in this industry. I mean, you order something and you see that it left the factory in China. You see that it got on a boat. You see that it got off the boat. You see that it was unloaded in this warehouse, and you can track a package, every step of the way. Whereas as short as 6-7 years ago, you were blind. You didn't know when it was coming until it showed up on your doorstep. But with that technology and with everybody working on their own technologies, nobody's technology works together. So you have all these partners and all these companies that want to work with you, that want you to do work for them, and it's very difficult to communicate. So having a simplified single platform that's a standard, or even a standardized integration system, so that if you do have different systems, you plug and play and they can talk to each other. But right now, there's no standardization, and it just makes for a lot of extra work for everybody.
It really does. I agree with that.
So
yeah,
I think that's one thing that could streamline things really quickly. You only gave me one magic wand, so I guess that's where I'll leave it. But
well, I'll let you take another stab at it if you'd like to, because I was hoping you'd talk more about training. But go ahead. What's your man?
That's exactly where I was going. When we talk about standardizations and technology, standardization and processes and training. I think we've all heard the horror stories of things that have happened on deliveries, and people that are doing deliveries that shouldn't be out there, because somebody didn't do a background check, or somebody got on a truck that wasn't supposed to be on the truck. They switched partners. There's 1,000 things that can go wrong once this truck leaves the dock. So having a standardization with that, I think even for customers, when you buy something, you don't know, how's it coming? Is somebody going to just drop it off? Are they going to bring it in? They're going to set it up? Well, I assume I paid a lot of money. They're going to bring it in and set it up. Well, assuming doesn't do much for you, and it causes just tons of issues in the industry. And, as things change and there's more threshold deliveries and more drop-offs, we started as a white glove delivery, and for a long time, we refused to do anything other than a full white glove delivery, because truly that's what people want. Not everybody wants to pay for it. Not everybody can afford to pay for it, but truly if you order a big piece of furniture to come in your home, you want somebody to come in, you want them to put the shelves in, you want them to unwrap it, to level it, to put your TV in it, to do whatever it is that needs to be done so that you can just sit back and enjoy it. You don't want to have to wrestle that thing up the stairs. You don't want to have to fight with your wife, hurt your back, do all those things that can come from doing it yourself. So for the longest time, we just wouldn't do it. But as the industry changes, as Amazon has become more prevalent, and people are getting used to getting packages delivered and not just that full white glove service, we have changed, we have adapted so that we can fit with the times.
It's interesting. While you're talking, here's what I was thinking is, obviously, you and I have been friendly competitors in the same towns before, and I've shared with you multiple times how frustrating it is to be in a customer's home getting yelled at for something that went wrong, and have that customer say, "But I thought I hired the white glove service," and then come to find out they thought they were hiring you. And even in my own neighborhood, that's happened, where my own neighbors said, "No, those Clark's people, the white glove people, that's who I thought you were." One thing I've always admired about you is you've always gravitated to your strictest clients' standards, and that's not easy. So I do want to throw another question at you that you weren't prepared for: is how did you, and you don't have to give me the secret recipe to the pizza sauce, but how do you get your teams to perform at that level where you have a client who says, "We need immaculate white trucks, immaculate backs of trucks, all the drivers in the exact same uniform. They have to look identical." How did you get your teams to that point?
I mean, I think that's where we started. And so getting them there, that was our expectation. I think that's one thing I get criticized for a lot, is you can't expect perfection. And I do. That's the standard we start with. Getting somebody that does less than that to increase their level of service is very difficult. Mm-hmm. It's easy for them to do less, but getting them to do more is very hard. So if you have a guy that's out delivering packages all day, and then he has one delivery where he has to provide full service, white glove, it's difficult to maintain those standards. So getting your teams to understand that they're there to take care of the customer. I think that's a question I'd love to ask guys on the dock, is who they work for. And the different answers you get. Like it's crazy. That most of them don't really know. And we all work for the customer. And that's what I tell everybody. We all work for the same person. We work for the customer, and you're there to take care of them. So setting that standard from the beginning makes it easy. I say makes it easy. It's not easy. It's difficult to uphold the standards, but it's a lot easier to uphold the standards when you start with those high standards. And occasionally, something will happen that you'll elevate the standards. And those are difficult sells. It's hard. It's just hard to get people that are doing something to do more for you. I don't know who said it, but they said, ask everybody in the room to raise their hand, and everybody in the room will raise their hand, and they say no, or raise your hand as high as you can. So everybody raises their hand, and they said, no, raise it really as high as you can. And everybody actually stick their hand up a little higher. Well, why didn't you stick it up that high to begin with? Well, because everybody doesn't give that full effort the first time all the time. So, getting those standards up there and setting them from the beginning, the training when you come in, actually sitting them down and telling them what is expected of them goes a long way to make it easier to uphold those standards.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for the detailed answer. Jim, as we start to wrap this up and come to the end of the interview, any last parting thoughts that you want to put out there to the universe related to final mile white glove delivery?
I think final mile is probably something that a lot of people are in that they didn't expect to be in. Like, nobody ever talked about doing furniture deliveries in high school. Like when you watch the slideshows or the career presentations, delivering furniture and logistics was just not included. So I think most people that are in it, that are successful at it, are people persons. They like to please people because it's a demanding job. And if you don't get some satisfaction from something, you're not going to be any good at it. So, being able to, make people happy is fun. Getting that phone call from the customer about what a great job the guys did, and how amazing they were. And they just smiled, most of the time. That's one of my biggest traits I look for when I hire somebody. Do they smile and are they personable? Because right there, you'll win over 50% of your customers. And then you can train the rest. You can train how to carry furniture, how to lift things. So being a people person goes a long way. And so, having people in this industry makes it fun to do.
Jim, I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for agreeing to do this, and I wish you more success in 2026.
All right. Awesome, John. You as well.
Ready to unlock the potential of your team? GetDoolin.com offers a web-based training platform designed for the final mile delivery industry and beyond. Whether you're in logistics, leadership, or operations, GetDoolin.com has you covered. Our micro-learning courses are quick, engaging, and most are less than 5 minutes each, so your team can learn on the go. With our mobile app, available for both Android and Apple, your team has access to training anywhere, anytime. Push notifications keep everyone up to date with new daily content, making sure no one falls behind. Track individual progress with ease. You'll know exactly who's watching each video and how your team is advancing toward their goals. At GetDoolin.com, every subscriber has a voice. Our two-way communication feature lets your team provide feedback and suggestions on the training, ensuring it's always relevant and valuable. GetDoolin.com is designed for all levels of your organization, from drivers and helpers to operations and leadership. No matter where they are in your company, GetDoolin.com helps everyone grow. GetDoolin.com is training that moves your business forward one micro lesson at a time.